Hey guys, it's finally time for us to do our poly art final project. So again, I'm going to show you a bunch of different examples by the artist that I like best that I showed you examples of before, Liam Brazier, I'm guessing is how you say his name. So you will notice in these examples that he does have the style of poly art, but he doesn't just use triangles. So I want you to kind of free your mind from just the pure triangles and kind of go more towards a cross between triangles and planar analysis. For your project, you are going to be doing this low poly art style, but you are also going to be required to stretch the boundaries in some way. So as we're looking through these examples, think to yourself, how are the boundaries of low poly art stretched in each of these examples? For instance, how is the background space used? How are the colors manipulated? In this example, he just uses two solid colors for the background and then cuts out the lighter blue to that kind of greenish color to create or imply the shadow. Versus in this example, he does kind of that circular cutout and then has Iron Man's hands overlaying on top of the red, and then the rest of the background follows the low poly art style. He also uses a lot of high saturated colors, which you can go one extreme or the other with that, or you could have a certain color scheme. Like this, he uses very warm colors over the entire thing. On this next one, again, he uses very highly saturated colors, but he's kind of got a warm versus cool going on in the background, as well as notice how he uses the space of the white border and the lettering to carve out of the colors of the picture. He does a similar thing with this Indiana Jones image here, where plants are very complicated by nature, but he uses the cutout around the legs, leaving it pure white in the background to help us focus on what's going on and the main character of this image. He does a similar thing with the background space of this Star Wars poster, where again we have kind of just that solid cream background and it's showing through to help us focus on what's going on, because with low poly art we have a lot of detail and that can be kind of overwhelming. Notice as well, while he's still using highly saturated colors for the most part, it is still a very cool color scheme. So it's a bunch of blues and purples all over. So that's one way that you can push the boundaries on your artwork. This next zombie one's pretty cool in how it uses the background color green as kind of negative space within the tattered clothes and rips in the flesh of the zombie. You can also use the background or strips of this poly art, different colors, to create a sense of movement, like in these superhero images. Notice how all of the diagonal lines or radial lines, whatever direction they're going, helps imply a sense of movement. Or, like they did in Captain America's, they made it look like light shining down, and it does add movement compositionally to the image. Also think about how you might change lines or movement within the objects of your image you pick, like the top of this piano. I'm sure it wasn't all those different colors whenever he actually did it, but he really created and pushed the art further by adding that variation on top of the piano and like the brighter color. It helps give emphasis and direct our eyes. There's also a lot of opportunity to push the boundaries in your art if you do a portrait, like how we only show partial of the face on the bottom right guy and how like the brains almost look like they're exploding out. In this one, we have one half of the face pretty solid, and then the other half is shattering like glass by leaving the white space in between the different shards. So really interesting ideas here. These are by no means the only different options that you have to push the boundaries on your art, but I want you to use those as some examples and then think outside of the box. Push yourself as you're looking at inspiration photos to consider what more you could do to make the art even better, even more than just using the low poly art method. What I'd like to do is go through some of the images that I considered before starting this project and let you know what some of the reasons were I didn't choose them. That doesn't mean you can't pick a picture for any of these reasons, but just some potential obstacles or issues that you might not foresee otherwise. So in this one, there's just a lot going on. It's cropped really widely. It has a lot of background information going on, which again isn't horrible. I could have done something where I cut out different things like he did on Indiana Jones or Spider-Man. But I feel like plants have so much tiny little detail that I didn't really want to bother with that. This next one I really liked, and I like how on the hands you get to see some of the additional value, but I felt like there wasn't enough differing values because she's silhouetted. It was mainly black, and that wasn't going to show up well. It's a similar situation with this one, and I actually started a little practice one just to see how it would turn out and look. Now, that's not to say you can't use something that it's partially silhouetted or it's monochromatic. You definitely can. There's no, you can't do this or you can't do that. It's just some things may be more challenging to make look good. As you can see here, the example one, it just falls kind of flat. It's not very exciting. Could I have made it more exciting by maybe changing up the colors, using some unexpected colors? Sure. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't the one I wanted to go with. This one again has a lot of plants, and the background is blurry versus the foreground is sharp, so I wasn't sure how I was going to make that work with the poly art. Again, possible to do, but just not something I wanted to try and tackle. A lot of detail going on in every element of the breastplate and the clothing. It was just not quite exciting enough of a picture for me to go through all the trouble of making that work. This one kind of has the opposite problem. I really liked it. I think it would make a cool one and could be pushed the boundaries up to make it more exciting, but it just wasn't quite exciting enough. Not enough detail to really warrant trying to do anything with this. Just cool, but not cool enough. Now, I did want to pull in a landscape option that I considered, and you guys can consider landscapes as well. Just a few things to keep in mind is if there is a focus on something in the foreground, how are you going to deal with the background being blurry, as well as anytime you are trying to show distance. Things that are closer to the viewer are larger and things that are farther away are smaller. So that would be the same thing for the polygon shapes that you use. The ones at the base, the bottom of the page, the ones that show the objects or grass or land or mountains, whatever is closest to us as the viewer, those shapes should be larger, and the ones further on the background should be smaller, theoretically. Now this one was really my second most favorite of the ones I had picked out. It's got really great changing colors, that high saturated color already. I didn't really need to change anything with that, different layers. I thought this one would be really cute to do, but ultimately I did go with a different one. Before I go into that though, I do want to review the requirements of the low poly art project, the things that I'm looking for. So for your project, just to go over again what I'm looking for, what I'm going to be grading on, and just really what I want you to challenge yourself on, is one, using the low poly art style. Again, this is just using polygonal shapes. It doesn't have to be just triangles. You can also push the boundaries on that as well, because your next requirement is that you stretch the boundaries of your project. So go outside of the norm. This can look like a lot of things. It's totally up to you, but some examples are making sections of the background solid color, or cutting out sections of the background, using a different background style or a different background completely to contrast the foreground, merging two or more photos. Maybe you want two different elements from two different photos and you want to make them one image, using unexpected colors, really highly saturated colors or low saturated colors, or a certain color scheme like warm versus cool or complementary colors. It is up to you. You could outline some of your shapes or all of your shapes, like in this little example here. You could cast shadows with certain shapes or all of them, totally up to you. You could add an interesting texture as an overlay over the entire thing. Do something that no one's ever seen before. That's kind of impossible, but try. Push yourself. We want to be creative here. That's the point of art, to be creative. So the image I ended up going with was this one. I really liked how it had that kind of Snow White vibe, kind of Disney vibe. So I'm going to show you before I go into the steps of it, in case people don't need to watch that. is this was how it turned out once I did the poly style art. My idea was to have it going up the arm as if it were like growing away from the poisoned apple after she took a bite out of it, but you couldn't really see it well enough against the skin, so I went in and on a different layer changed the coloring and kind of cropped in tighter so we focused on the hands and the apple. I'm still not completely happy with this example, so I think I might try to do another one just to do a little bit better one, because like I said, I'm not completely happy with it. But I wanted to have some sort of example to show you kind of my version of pushing the boundaries. I also changed the coloring of the background of the scene a bit so that it was a lower saturation and had more of that blue that matched the hands, because like if you look at the original animated Snow White, red and blue are really the main colors there, and blue is kind of like the evil witch's color. So I wanted to have that play in and play a part. Always remember to create a copy of your background layer. That way, if you mess up or you need elements from the original, it is there for you in your Photoshop document file. Otherwise, unless you just need to see my steps, you are free to go ahead and get started. The rest of it's just going to be a run through of my work that I did on this particular artwork. But I hope you guys have lots of fun, come up with something creative, and I can't wait to see the results. Bye guys.